Welcome to the Debrief, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the headlines they're covering this week and where the story's going next. I'm Jim Antle. I'm joined today by Editor-in-Chief Hugo Gurdon. Hugo, Republicans looked a few months ago like they were in a really strong position, and that position seems, over the summer months, to have deteriorated somewhat. And there are a few things people attribute that to. What are some of the things that you think are factors here?
Well, one of the things that I think is playing into it, and this was, I was a little skeptical that this would do so, was the decision in Dobbs to end the abortion right under Roe versus Wade. That in itself was, I think, not a big political issue, but it did fire up the left-wing base. And
Right.
I think that the Republicans have been able to be presented by the Democrats as overplaying their hand, as overreaching in the wake of Dobbs. Very quickly after the Dobbs decision came out, congressional Republicans started talking about the possibility of federal legislation to limit abortion rights, and obviously the pro-life movement would regard that as an absolutely right thing to do, and I think it is. But for years, the Republicans had been arguing that abortion was a matter for the states to decide democratically, and so the optics looked pretty bad. And you saw things like, not just on Capitol Hill, people like Kevin McCarthy entertained the possibility of going for a 15-week ban. But the voters in Kansas were asked about whether they wanted to remove the abortion right from the Constitution. And they voted by nearly 60-40 against that right. And that's a very conservative state, which just suggests to me that there is some disquiet about the way in which Republicans are playing things in the aftermath of Dobbs.
And the Kansas vote also had a very large turnout for a primary.
Right. Yes, it did indeed, and so you could see that that the Democrats were fired up, or the abortion supporters were fired up by Dobbs, and that could play out in the November elections as well.
So now, what role does former President Donald Trump play in all of this? Because obviously Republicans would like to see this election be a referendum on Joe Biden, but the former president is endorsing a lot of candidates and really hasn't gone away in any other respect, is still probably the dominant Republican in the national media, and is talking about running again in 2024.
Right. Sadly, Donald Trump is a huge factor, and a very, very difficult one for Republicans. As you say, he's been endorsing a lot of candidates. Until a few weeks ago, a few primaries ago, he was losing as many as he was winning. And in fact, I think that the primaries were revealing limited strength for Donald Trump. And so that's why people were talking about the red wave a month ago, 2 months ago, etc. But more recently, Trump's candidates have been winning. Obviously, in Arizona, they made rather a sweep, which made people sit up and pay attention. And partly it is Trump's candidates, or the ones that he has endorsed, who make organizations like 538, forecasting organizations, think that the Democrats have a better than even chance of strengthening that position in the Senate. There are candidates like Herschel Walker in Georgia, a state which really should be ripe for the Republicans to retake, having lost those two Senate seats just less than 2 years ago, and not performing well against Warnock. So there, Donald Trump's influence is strong. Donald Trump also continues to stump the country, talking about his belief, or at least his story, that the 2020 election was stolen. So he is helping Democrats make the midterm elections a binary choice between him and Biden. This is exactly the strategy that the Democrats have with constantly playing Trump up, and the January 6th hearings are designed, which are going to go on into the fall, are designed to make this a binary choice between Biden and Trump, which Biden has already shown he can win. This is not what the Republicans want, who want to make it simply a referendum on 2 dreadful years under President Biden. And of course, the profile of Trump will be raised considerably further by the FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago just in the last couple of days.
And we've seen in some Republican primaries where Trump and Democratic operatives in effect back the same candidate.
Yes, that's right. The Democrats are very keen to run against weaker candidates. Who wouldn't be? It's something which politicians and parties have always tried to do. So the Democrats have been backing the Trumpy candidates, and indeed helping them in some cases. It's extremely cynical and hypocritical to present yourself as opposed to Trump because you are trying to defend democracy and yet backing his in his candidates. But nevertheless, it could be cynically effective in helping the Democrats face candidates they would prefer to face, rather than more nationally or at least more broadly appealing candidates who are less Trumpy.
Finally, are there any opportunities that you see Republicans missing that they were maybe taking as recently as when Glenn Youngkin was elected governor of Virginia?
Yeah, there are a couple of things that I would mention on that. One is the more recent, the Republicans are, the messaging right now is a little more difficult on the economy. It isn't very long ago that the real concern was about economic overheating and, of course, runaway inflation. Inflation is still roaring at 8.5%. But there have been recent signs that inflation is abating, and it's abating because there are growing fears of a recession. One of the things, this is muddying the messaging of Republicans on the economy, and there's a danger that the midterm elections might arrive at precisely the point where everyone can see that inflation pressures are easing, and yet the recession, which is making them ease, has not yet begun to bite deeply. So that timing might work out rather well for Democrats. But I think there's another thing that Republicans are missing. We are now just approaching the time when students are going back to school, late this in August and early in September. There's a huge issue that Glenn Youngkin won on, and that was school choice, parental involvement. The Washington Examiner is starting a program in conjunction with several conservative think tanks next week, which is about empowering families in education. It seems to me that this is, Glenn Youngkin showed what a powerful issue this was, and the Democrats, Terry McAuliffe, the governor, former governor of Virginia, absolutely blundering on this.
Right.
This is a really potent issue to trying to get middle-class suburban voters into the Democratic column and not into the Republican column, not the Democratic one. And I think that that Republicans are not stressing school choice or empowering families as much as they could. They should be pushing that going into the election.
Thank you, Hugo.
Thanks very much.
You can read Hugo and the rest of our political team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.